Men are restricted to only a couple of emotions, and I feel like they're getting shut down for even those, right? So they weren't allowed to have vulnerability. They're not allowed to be sick. It now we have decided their anger is dangerous, so they're really not allowed to have that. And their sexuality is also kind of deemed unnecessary or dangerous, so they're not allowed to have that, which is often connected to their sense of love. And so shut down the men. That's no longer good for our society.
Welcome to The Intimate Philosopher, where philosophy meets intimacy and life's biggest questions finally feel at home. I'm Dr. Emma Smith. I'm a licensed professional counselor, certified sex therapist, and existential philosophy nerd, inviting you to join me for an after-hours conversation. This is a space to slow down, pour a glass of wine, or maybe a cup of tea, and explore the messy, beautiful intersections of meaning, connection, desire, and being fully human. This is the place for real conversations about the parts of life that don't fit neatly into a box. So, grab your glass, get comfy, and let's dive in. Hi, friends, and welcome back to another episode of The Intimate Philosopher. Today, I am so excited to share this guest with you. She is somebody that I met several years ago now when we were going through sex therapy training. And, have you ever met someone who just immediately feels like an old friend? Like,
Yes, you.
so thank you so much for that. So I'm just going to jump in and I'm going to say, welcome, Melissa Kester, to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
so excited to be here.
Amazing. Amazing. All right. So before we dive in, I have to brag on you a little bit and read your bio. So, Melissa Kester is a certified relational life therapist. We're going to find out what that is. An integrative mental health professional, sex and couples therapist, and grief educator. She's grounded in a systemic lens and works with relationships and the bodies within them. And I don't know that we talk a lot about that in that way. So I just love that. Melissa supports couples and individuals as they strengthen communication, work through conflict, and create repair. She also has a particular focus on how chronic illness, caregiving stress, neurodiversity, and other biological realities can strain relationships. Melissa's work helps clients uncover relational patterns and systemic legacies shaping the couple, opening the way for greater clarity, communication, and meaningful connection. Wow. I don't know if I've ever read a bio and had like a mic drop moment. Like, that's it. Goodbye. The show's over. Here we go. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, it's taken me it sounds very impressive when I hear it read. I don't feel it inside, but it's so nice to have finally come to a place where I'm just like, yes, this is what I do. And to feel like I'm owning it, but maybe that's being in my 40s. So,
Yes. Yes. I feel like that is kind of some of the magic of that the fourth decade.
yeah.
Well, yes. Oh my goodness. So true. Okay. Well, so there's so many things I want to talk to you about. I will limit myself to two, but I will trust that you will tell me that they're related anyway. Because one of the things that has always stuck out about your work to me is that you come at, I think you just come at your work with such an honesty in saying, you know, like patriarchy hurts everyone, right? Including men. And you were one of the first people that I really heard in the sex and couples therapy world who was like, yeah, I work with straight men. I love working with straight men. And back in like, what was that, 2020 or something?
Mhm.
That was
Yeah.
a particularly popular stance.
It is
So
not
yeah,
historically, no.
yeah. So can we start there? Can you just like tell us, share about that work?
Yeah, it's I started my work in a practice that focused around anger management in New York. So I ended up working with a lot of grandiosity, narcissism, and anger. I mean, there's lots of intensity in New York, right? And but what I learned was that as I was talking with my male clients, that there was such softness, such tenderness. There was a lot of self shaming, but yet their self shame didn't quite line up with their internal character. Like they bought the patriarchal story that they was shoved onto them, but it didn't match their internal being. And I became a mom of a son and a daughter and wanted them to have equal rights to their bodies and emotions and the world. And I realized that pretty early on that when my son started to look like a boy, the world that used to wave hello to him with the big warm hello that he greeted the world with eventually shut down. And people wouldn't want to give him a hug the way they used to. They wanted to handshake or fist bump. And so, like, the world starts emotionally closing to our boys early on. And so, not only are they hearing it from their peers, they're hearing it from their family around how they're greeted. And so, I ended up finding myself sticking up for my son around that. I stuck up for my daughter in ways too, like the world calling her flirt when she was 18 months. Not cool. Like, right?
Wow.
But my son wasn't, who had this arms open wide to the world, felt so many intense emotions, was shut down. And I do believe that boys come into the world with such an intensity of feeling and vulnerability.
Mhm.
And to tell boys that they're not allowed to have that. I mean, we all know what happens as therapists when we tell people to stop feeling, right? And this is something that they get almost right away.
Wow. So how old was he when you started noticing that shift?
I started to notice the world shifting towards him when he was around 5.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's so young.
So young. And he was kind of, getting, yeah, I guess 5, kindergarten age. We were on the subway. He wanted to wave hi like he always did, and somebody looked at him and looked away, like, disgruntled.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
not even neutral, just negative.
Mhm.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so you're in this practice, you're, focusing on anger and narcissism and aggression and those types of things. And then is that what led you to relational life therapy? Was there a segue?
That is exactly what led me to relational life therapy. I had a colleague, and I actually not too far from that time, I also had a client say, "You should read Terry Real." And I went and I started to listen to one of his free online trainings and read one of his books and decided this was a right match for me. His model traces the lineage of systems therapy. So it felt like a little bit of a coming home for me. But then there was certain things like naming the 3 phases and talking about how to create that leverage, all of that. I think I really needed to hear articulated in the way Terry started to talk about it, how to that we can be brave in speaking our truth as clinicians,
Mhm.
especially as couples therapists, because this work really is a very can be a very vigilant type of work. I'm always a little bit energetically on, whereas when I'm working with my individuals, I can be a little bit more relaxed, have a little bit more breath. But when I'm working as a couples therapist, I'm paying attention to the activation for each individual, the way they said something, the nonverbal, the gentle daggers they might throw at one another. And then also, if I name it, is it something that they're going to actually not notice? Is it a dagger they don't notice, but I notice? And
Mhm.
are we moving on? So it's just like I might raise a little mirror, but if they don't think anything of it, I'm moving on. So letting go of that outcome, not being attached to this work more than they're attached to this work, helped give me a little bit more freedom.
Yes. Oh, that's so interesting. That's so interesting. And so for people who aren't familiar with Terry Real, I think like one of the things that I really appreciate about him. I have not taken the training yet. I am on a training embargo.
You have a lot going on right now, Em.
I do. I do. No, I am not. I think this might be the first time that I was not like in a certification of some sort, but I have a lot of interest in this. And I promise that the reason that I like him is not necessarily because he built an entire therapy system around a Jersey attitude, but also, but
It's very
also
East Coast. Yeah.
it is. It's a very East Coast, very New York, just being able to say it's straight off the shoulder. In fact, I was listening to a podcast he was on. I don't even know what podcast he was on. I just caught it and started listening. And he was talking about how much he uh, gets frustrated with individual therapists for for not talking to this person that is in a relationship, um, like they are, part of, an integral part of this relationship. So, can you expand on that? Because I feel like I'm watching you and I'm like, oh, you have big
Uh,
feelings on these too. Okay.
I do have big feelings on it.
Okay.
A lot of times, and look, I've been vulnerable to this too. As individual therapists, if this is our main focus, we can get lost in our client's story and their narrative, and it becomes a vacuum.
Mhm.
And so, what we can get on the flip side, I've watched this happen to parents, I've experienced it as a sibling, right? Like, we can encounter this. And one, it's nice to feel validated for their individual client and to be heard. But as a couples therapist, when my clients are in relationship and that relationship isn't being considered, it actually can be quite devastating. So if my client is saying, um, my significant other always gets angry and yells when I do this. And if I ask them more about their lens, they're just going to keep fueling their lens. And that's what I'm going to be filled up with. And that my story is going to be their story. As a family therapist, I know I get so much more complexity. I'm getting a full picture. One was like kind of like an impressionist painting. And if I ask them for their significant other, what they think their significant other would say if they're in the room, I'm going to get so much more detail into that painting. And the beautiful thing is, a lot of times they're really honest. They don't just share, well, let's ignore what they would say. And a lot of times it's pretty amazing. They'll come in and say, this is what my significant other would say, for better or for worse. And so I get it. It's really quite amazing.
Oh wow, that's so fascinating. Yeah, it's really interesting because I started out as an individual therapist, and this was one of the pieces that was really hard for me, and I remember when I was thinking about this, and it's a couple years ago, and I started listening to Terry Real's stuff, and I mean, he's very honest about how he feels about individual therapy, particularly trauma therapy, and it
Which is your bag.
I know. Which I was like, "Oh, okay, great." And I thought about this and I was like, "Yeah, but I actually felt so, like, blessed with the mentors that I had, and I mean, I was trained by excellent therapists. So, what the heck?" And then I was doing some self-reflection. I was like, "Oh, right. Right." So, my very first mentor was a specialist in domestic violence and intimate partner violence. And then I spent the first 6 years of my career working with sexual assault survivors, where it was all about this deep individual work of, like, restoring a sense of self after this horrific event, right? And so, like, I I had to build this back in, probably, gosh, like a decade in to the work and say, uh-oh, wait a second. I'm dealing with a different set of folks right now. Like, this isn't that work. Sometimes I get that work and yeah, I can do that and I can slip into that very naturally. But a lot of the survivors that I'm even seeing now, it's really interesting because a lot of them are married and they're just uncovering this next layer of healing that can't be done individually. It has to be done
Has to be done
in a
relationally.
relation. Yes.
The the important thing is like when I worked with my clients individually and they're not in a relationship, the speed of change, and I'm not saying this so that everybody goes out there and gets into a relationship so they can do some emotional healing. That's not why I'm saying that. But that there is, and we're finding this, right? Dan Siegel writes about this, and we're actually finding data that relational work is a source of healing. And I think that's really the kind of the foundation of what makes therapy so successful and why I don't imagine AI will ever take our place because this is the level of human to human relational work that is going to create neurological change that doesn't happen in many places. And so systemic work and thinking systemically provides that for us. And I think a lot of times, right, we think of kind of back to the kind of my work with men, we think of uh, those classic paintings. I know we were both raised with that Roman Catholic upbringing, right? But those classic paintings of Mary and Jesus, but Joseph's like, maybe off to the side, nowhere in the scene, like not part of the picture. Um, and so we want men part of the system to trust that they are as equally valuable as, their partner. And I know I say men because I work mostly with cis hetero couples, but I think we usually have the masculine, feminine can energies in the space. Is what I've noticed even with my same sex couples. So that's
Oh,
what I would
okay.
say. I usually will still see one a little bit more in the stereotypical masculine, one a little bit more in the stereotypical feminine, even if they are the same sex. I don't know, but that's your specialty.
I mean, it's been really interesting. One of the very interesting and kind of humorous pieces of having moved from DC to Tennessee is actually how my clientele shifted.
Mm.
And going from being one of many therapists who was working with, LGBT and the full spectrum of relationship constructs and orientations and practices and all of that. And actually, in Tennessee, it is mostly I have mostly heterosexual couples. Um, and I'm dealing with a lot more religious trauma in a much more forward way. Like, I feel like in DC, some people had some of that. And it was kind of like, there were some threads that were still kind of stuck somewhere, and we would like, grab the tweezers, pull them out, and then like that was it. Here it's a lot like there's the roots are still there. And so it's a lot more unpacking, but that has been one of the most fascinating things for me, especially because I didn't change my marketing.
Right. No, I hear you. When I moved from New York to DC, you would think big cities, perfect. No, there is a very different like social network each city you kind of or each place you move to. It's fascinating.
It really is. It really is. Let me pause the episode for a second because I want to ask you something. When is the last time that your partner looked at you like the person they married and not the co manager of your household? If you're running your life together flawlessly, the schedules, finances, the kids, all of it, but somewhere along the way you became project partners instead of lovers, I have a name for that. I call it roommate mode. And it's not a sign that anything is wrong with you or your relationship, but it is a sign that the exact skills that make you excellent at everything else are working against you in this one area. I'm teaching how to break it live and one night only with a couple of friends on August 14th. The spots are limited and I'm not recording this one. So if you want in, DM me the word reclaim or click the link in the show notes and I'll get you all set up before it fills. I wasn't going to ask you this, but it just popped into my head. Do you
Oh,
mind?
go for
Can
it.
I drop something completely new on you? What do you think? Like down here, there's a heavy emphasis on um, religious parity, right? And like saying, so one of the things is, are you a Christian? I have never been asked this before when I
Mhm.
moved down here. And what's even more interesting about it is that I don't even know how to answer them because depending on who you ask down here, Catholic doesn't count as Christian. And so I have defaulted now to this like, well, I tell you what, why don't I tell you what I believe and then you can decide? Because I'm not sure. And usually people laugh, and they're just like, oh my gosh, like what is happening? But I mean, I have an answer as to like why I feel the way I do about how I show up in the space. Like I show up very secular in this space. Um, I don't know. Like, what do you think about that? Is it relevant? Is it not relevant? I don't know.
I mean, for my sisters who are very religious, it is relevant for them. For me, who's bounced around and loved exploring different religions, it's more of just part of the person's story,
Mhm.
of the stories that have flowed through their lives and guided them. So, yeah. What about for you? Is there?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I think that I stopped going to church when I was working at the Rape Crisis Center. Um, and I don't think I've ever talked about this. Um, and the reason I stopped going, people are like, "Oh, you stopped believing." No. No, no, no. I stopped going because I had survivors from every parish that I could possibly think of across every denomination. I mean, I don't like when we say that sexual assault doesn't discriminate, I'm talking like it's everywhere. And I never wanted a survivor to see me in a congregation and think, oh, I can't talk to her about whatever because I think her presence here means this. And so I
Mhm.
stopped going.
Mhm.
and just kind of shifted my, belief inward. But that was it's a weird place to kind of navigate because I'm like, yeah, if your faith is important to you, then obviously we need to have that in the room with us, but like, uh, I can't quote the Bible in a meaningful way, right? Like, I, I don't know many Catholics who can, honestly.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing. I don't know many Catholics who can.
Right, exactly. So, like, if you want that kind of you know, uh that kind of approach, then no, I am not your girl, right?
Yeah.
But like if you want to tell me what your values and beliefs are and you want to learn how to build a relationship that is grounded in respect and love and trust with those principles, sure, we can go there. I mean, do you feel any block on any of that?
No, when I'm listening to you, I'm reminded of this story that keeps bubbling up for me in my work. Um, and I'm not quite certain where things start and end with this. Like, what are the solid boundaries around it? But when it comes to being therapists, I believe our job is about being curious, being understanding, making sure our clients don't harm themselves. We're not trying to push our philosophical agenda. If they're bringing hate speech in, I might be curious about that hate speech. I'm going to be curious about where that comes from, what fueled that, how they learned that.
Mhm.
And to be, I think, to lovingly try to see how flexible they can be with it, to see that if they can find tenderness and warmth for people in that community that they previously had prejudices against.
Yeah.
And I don't make the world better unless I'm able to move into that direction. So a lot of times as therapists, we have the um, I want clinicians who fit into this category.
Mhm.
And I believe that's important for us as clients. But then there's another part of me that also believes it's important to test the clinician who might speak to that part of us that feels like we can't work with a male therapist or we can't work with a female therapist,
Mm.
because it might enlighten parts of ourselves that we didn't know needed to be awakened.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's so true. I mean, that's so true. And like, you know, you say it so eloquently that you make it sound easy. And I know that sometimes when you hear something come flying out of someone's mouth, especially if you didn't expect it, it can be like, oh, okay. But I agree with what you said about, you know, I'm curious about where that comes from. It's less
Mhm.
about what the person says and the words, and it's more about, for me, like, that comes from a wound. And here's the other thing. I know that there's a lot of stuff made up, but we know that hate and bigotry and prejudice and resentment is not healthy for you. It is
No, it hurts.
It does. It hurts us. It doesn't hurt the person. I mean, it can hurt the person, obviously, who it is aimed at externally, but it hurts the person who is also carrying that,
Mhm.
right? And so, you know, there's this idea of like, do you, at the core of who you are, believe that people are inherently good or are they not? And for me, and sometimes it's more challenging than other times, I, right? I believe that people are inherently good,
Mhm.
right? Like, I really do. And I think about little boys,
Yeah.
right? And it's so interesting because, I'm from New Jersey, which most people think of as a blue state, but I'm actually from a very conservative area in
Yeah, New Jersey can be pretty purple.
yes. And people don't realize that. And I think about some of the men, right? Because now we're in our 40s. I think about some of the men who I have known since I was a child and who I knew them to be and who they are now. And sometimes there's such a disconnect. And
Mhm.
I just end up thinking, what happened? Right? Something had to happen because I knew you too young for that not to be the thing. Right.
Mhm.
And I just think that it's so interesting because, like, I think it can be challenging as therapists when people walk in and they're like,
Mhm.
spouting stuff off. And I just think, "Ooh, something happened." Right? Because if I can think of a half a dozen people who I am confident something had to happen because I knew who they were, it's probably pretty likely that something happened to these people too, but I don't know. And what I have found, I'm curious if this is true for your work too, is that if you dig, you find it.
Mhm. And they wanna share it.
Yes.
I mean, men wanna share it. They they want more than just penetrative sex. They want relationship, they want cuddles, and they wanna be vulnerable.
Mm,
It's bringing that sense of safety to that vulnerability. A lot of times that dodging is because they've been so well indoctrinated
mhm,
into not going there,
mhm,
right? That they don't know how to talk about it. My son went from crying anytime he got a little bit of a scratch, to not being allowed to cry outside,
mm,
to um, not really knowing how to talk to his peers about things.
mm,
And now he's a teenager. And while he's a person who likes to have conversation, a lot of his peers converse and engage around a video game, which is fine as long as we're playing, we're talking and we're playing. It can be like doing a tabletop game. But if there's no conversation, then we're in parallel play. And that's something, right, when we're thinking about developmental shifts, when we have our children and their toddlers, they're doing parallel play. We're looking forward to the moment when they can do what we're doing now and they're having conversation, right? But are our children having parallel play to talking a little bit to then having parallel play? How are we nurturing boys into having conversation and knowing the connection between their bodies and their minds and spirits? Um,
yeah.
I I often, and I'm noticing as I'm talking about it, there's so much when I think about my work with men that I want to share. It's almost like it wants to fly out of my mouth before I even think about it coherently. And so I'm practicing slowing it down for you. But I have, with our little boys, um, we I like to call it the playground model, but they would be on the playground and they would bounce off of each other. And if one gets hurt, well, then they're off to the races and they're going to start fighting. And then they're going to calm down and they're going to be friends again,
Mhm,
right? If little girls get hurt on the playground emotionally, their friends might swarm around them and console them and try to make it better. And what a different reality, right? We're going to fight it out
mhm.
and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna be cool. Nothing really said. We just said it with our bodies. And our little girls who just said it with their words and went on. But both of them found a way to go on, but one required a lot more kind of emotional attunement. But neither right or wrong, just different. And so when I think about couples in relationship when they're trying to have conversation, right? one indoctrinated into conversation and the other one into, well, we don't really talk about it. We either shove it under the rug or we fight it out and then we get on with our day, right? But
Mhm.
it feels off and then we go on.
Yeah.
And we bring it in.
Absolutely. And I mean, that translates into sex too,
Mm.
right? Like, there's all of this idea of, connection. I'll hear somebody talk about it's usually the female partners, like, we'll talk about connection and intimacy and wanting to be close and a lot more quality time. And then my guys will often be um, in a way that seems at first like fixated on, yeah, but what about the sex part? You know, what about the sex part? And it was a couple years ago that I realized, like, oh, right, that's the only way that we allow you to receive love.
That's right. That's right. Men are restricted to only a couple of emotions, and I feel like they're getting shut down for even those, right? So they weren't allowed to have vulnerability. They're not allowed to be sick. It now we have decided their anger is dangerous, so they're really not allowed to have that. And their sexuality is also kind of deemed unnecessary or dangerous, so they're not allowed to have that, which is often connected to their sense of love. And
Mhm.
so shut down the men. That's no longer good for our society.
Yeah.
We have a different inequality. And we in society, and what I love about Terry is that kind of ecology of the relational spirit is that, well, really, if relationships are going to thrive, if society is going to thrive, we need to find a way to get rid of inequality. In our significant relationships, that's a lot easier to do than societal wise, where we have to gather so many more people to the table to make
Mhm.
that work. So I want that. We're going to keep working on that. But, like, couples first.
Yes, yes. Start small because you have the
Yeah.
most leverage and you have the most influence in that space. And I think
Hmm.
it's so interesting because, you know, I I can hear in a past version of myself being like, you know, but most violence is right, and but most sexual assault is, and
Hmm.
saying this and like really saying like, yeah, I know. Like, we're not saying that those things aren't true,
Hmm.
but we're also talking about the guys who are sitting in therapy,
That's right. And we
right?
want them to come to therapy because the guys coming to therapy are going to make the world better. The guys
Exactly.
saying, being able to identify, yes, I've been sexually assaulted. Meanwhile, most men can't even recognize it when it happens to them, right? Because they're supposed to want it. That still exists enough in our society that they can't understand when their bodies have been violated.
Yeah.
And that's not okay.
No, no, it's not. And so we need to kind of have this, you know, meeting of everyone with a vested interest, I think in a I don't know that it's necessarily the middle, but it is a space where conversation can happen
Mhm.
and an honest conversation can happen.
Mhm.
So, oh my goodness. This is kind of an interesting segue into, we're talking about like what's allowed, what's not allowed, and all of that. And there's another piece that I want to make sure that we have time to talk about, which is your work with chronic illness, because I think that we don't talk about this enough, and particularly in the context of sex and relationships
Mhm.
and how that shows up. So, how are you seeing that show up? I mean, and you can relate it to what we've been talking about or not, but yeah.
To be all honest, I feel like Lee Phillips is the better man for or person for this job. Because my couples, when it comes to chronic illness, don't always jump into the topic of sex. For my clients with chronic illness, w- it's a variety. And, I'm working on a model. I know. But I'm really exploring kind of the legacies around health in family systems because it's not just how it exists today in the moment when we have illness pop up. There are generations of health issues that then led to a legacy dynamic in the family system. Um, so I want to kind of like honor how that shows up in our personal knapsack. I don't have many couples that talk about chronic illness and their sexuality. I do have a couple. Um, but a lot of times there is this age component coming in, right? And this compounding nature of aging and chronic illness plus our sexuality
Mhm.
showing up, right? Maybe if they've had ADHD and thyroid conditions, and then on top of it, there might be some mild cognitive impairment starting to show up. And when those issues start to compound each other, it's not just like their partner is dealing with the forgetful nature of mild cognitive impairment. No, they're dealing with the forgetfulness of mild cognitive impairment, ADHD, and thyroid issues. And so it's compounded. And right, we know what it's like when we feel like our significant other isn't connected to the relationship, isn't part of the relationship. And it really pulls us away from our intimacy and our connection. And it's my male clients who are more vulnerable right now. I'm not saying this is always the case, but
Mhm.
who I'm seeing right now is mostly my male clients. Then again, I shouldn't say anything about it because most of my clients are male. So what am I talking about? I don't know the percentages because most of my clients are male. Um, But I do have to say that with that component, plus the awareness that connection and touch is part of their identity for love and intimacy is part of how they identify love, it creates a real struggle because what they're pulling for is that connection. And what their significant other is pulling for is some way to be seen. And so it's how to create that emotional safety while also nurturing that relational pillar of physical intimacy and touch in a way that honors the both of them, where neither of them is kind of like overly giving, but both of them are really trying, right?
Mm. Yeah.
But when I think about Lee Phillips, I think about he just does this in such a different and awesome way with chronic illness and sexuality. I also have clients where it becomes a struggle around, their hypermobility. Um,
Oh my gosh, yes, please talk about this.
so yes, so that is, just an area where just tending to your body and the safety, um, right? Because a lot of times with hypermobility, we want to make sure certain muscles are strengthened so
Mhm.
that we don't hurt ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, you know, and so we want to support that, but also at the same time, hypermobility can impact so much our gut health, our heart, um, what sensations might be like vaginally, right? So all of that can come into play for my clients. And so it's important for them to just have that open dialogue that I think clients can really find in their work with sex therapists, with pelvic floor therapists, if it's like a vaginal issue. So this way they can start bringing that language forward and not nurturing that kind of that island experience. Because it's just our sexual pillar is just too important because it meets parts of ourselves relationally. And I also consider health to be another relational pillar that we don't often talk about. So that's one of my, when I talk to my clients, I add health in
I
there too.
love this. I love this. Well, you'll have to promise to come back on the podcast when you're ready to share your model because
Mhm.
that's fantastic. And like, we need updated models. It's kind of bananas to me that, like, every time I go to a training and depending on which one it is, like, we are talking about people from the 1930s, uh, who, we're talking about Freud and Jung, and I understand, like, yes, we need to nod, tip our hat to the legacy,
Mhm.
but there's also, I mean, there's so much about neuroscience and, when you're talking about like health factors, I'm sure like, I don't remember when we discovered that epigenetics were a thing, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't in the 1930s. So,
No, no, actually, it became really loud through the studies of Holocaust survivors. So it's since the 1930s.
yes, yes, right. And is it the Irish with the famine,
Yep.
right?
The potato famine.
There was a potato famine. And then there was something in like a Norwegian area too, I think. I can't
Oh,
remember.
I don't.
I
Mhm.
don't know, but I just remember, like, seeing all of this and being like, "Oh my gosh," like, and we do not
Yeah.
talk about this enough.
No, no. And how it then that also, right, with all that trauma and that epigenetics piece, that also plays a role in our chronic illness component. So, so much is kind of alive in this chronic illness um, stories around gender, sexuality, and relationship, and then the legacies of all of that in our physical systems. That, yeah, so
Mm.
much.
Yeah, so much. That's I mean, we could talk all day about this. I think
And we have in our past, but
I think, as I'm thinking about this, if anybody is listening and they're just like, "So does that just mean I'm screwed? Like, there's just no getting on top of this thing?" What do you tell them?
oh, I often channel what I've channeled within myself on my own health journeys, which is life can be hard, but we can't let it take control of us. Every day, that oh my goodness, I love cartoons. But in the second Frozen, when Anna sings like, put that the next step forward, just do the next right thing. That's basically, I'm channeling like this kind of 1940s mentality. Just do the next right thing. It doesn't have to be the perfect thing all the time. It just has to be right for you, your relational system in that moment. I always want my clients to think relationally, but I also want them to honor their physical and emotional boundaries first. So honor your capacity, where you are, what you know it's coming up, and honor the importance of your relational system.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah. And so, like, I mean, as I'm listening to everything that you're unpacking in here, I'm like, hey, listen, if you're struggling with some of these things, you know, maybe, and I'm thinking about my type A plus plusers, right? Who I know are just like used to being good at things and they're
I
used
mean,
to
they're
figuring
stellar, but they might be making themselves sick. But stellar.
right? And also, like, hey, if this is difficult, it could just be that it's difficult. It is actually difficult to be a human being and carry all of this stuff.
And at
That
different ages, we have different capacities, and that is normal and okay. We can't expect what we did in our 20s or in our teens to be the same thing as we do in our 40s. What we want to do is strategize so that whatever we're doing is the best plan for us in that moment.
mm, I love that. I love that. And then enlist help along the way. And
Lots of help.
yeah, yeah, I love it.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, Melissa, thank you so much for being on the show today. I know that we just gave my listeners so much to unpack and sit with, and it's wonderful in the best ways, right? If this episode generates questions for you or if you have a reaction, I would love to hear it. And I always put a link to a comments form in my show notes. So go there. And if you have a question specifically for Melissa, I know where to find her. Like, we're friends in real life.
We
So,
are.
yeah. So, like,
And you can ask me questions.
there you go. Like, I will ask her, and then we'll either bring her back on the show or I will tell you what she said, and then we'll just kinda go from there. So, thank you again for joining me, Melissa, and thank you to my listeners for just coming along on this journey, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me for this after hours conversation. If something in today's episode made you pause, get curious, or see yourself a little more clearly, share it with a friend and keep that conversation going. Until next time, keep exploring that messy, beautiful space between meaning and being human. I'll see you next time.